opening statement, and then we'll go into questions, and we'll get a mic to you as usual. Coach.
Hey, good morning. I know that there's a lot of Tennesseans that are being affected by the recent floods. Just want them to know that our thoughts are with them. We're thinking about them, and in particular in Mid-State. A lot of fans that are located there, and I just want them to know that we're thinking about them. Got started today with a little bit of our Monday routine, and as we go through the week, it'll be kind of a combination of some game prep and some good-on-good work that we'll get through the course of the week. With that, open it up for some questions.
Questions? We'll start with Rob.
Coach, just the obligatory quarterback question. Have you established it at the court?
You wanted to be the first one to go?
Yeah, let's get it out of the way.
All right, I like it. Yeah, no decisions have been made. Those guys have been great, continue to compete. We'll see where we're at here at the end of this week.
Jimmy?
There were times during the viewing period that we had where it seemed like during some of the throws against air, there were a lot of balls hitting the ground. Are you better in that regard? Do you feel better about where you are there?
Yeah, we've continued to get better, absolutely. More in sync, and it's everybody, right? Routes being on time, being disciplined in it, and then quarterbacks, fundamentals, technique, all those things. As you get into competition situations, 7-on-7, team situations, their decision-making plays a big part, and their body's getting in the right position too. But I like the progress that we've made there.
Coach, I know there's always work to be done, but as you get to this point in camp, do you feel like your team, you get to that point where it's time to play, that you need to hit somebody else, you need to do some things? And how much is that balancing act this week of game prep versus continue to kind of beat on each other in that 11-on-11 work?
Yeah, I like that you started by stating the obvious right there before your question came out. Yeah, we got a lot of work. We will balance it, and we do that during the course of the season too. I think good teams continue to get better as you go through the season, and a part of that is still continuing to work on your fundamentals, your technique by position, but then getting some good-on-good work as well during the course of the season. I think it's imperative that you do that inside your program. This week will be a combination of both of those things. We'll start with a little bit of introductory into our game plans on offense and defense, but there's still going to be a lot of good-on-good work this week.
Do you like where you are right now?
Yeah, as a coach, and you started it, you're never where you want to be, right? As a coach, you always see the things that you got to continue to improve on. I love this team's effort and energy, the way that they've learned how to approach walking up the stairs and going to meetings and being consistent in those competitive behaviors that you got to have. During the course of training camp, throughout summer, throughout spring ball, we've gotten better, man. I think about the first day of full pads in spring ball and where we are today. We've continued to grow, and we are unfinished, and you're always continuing to push forward. But I like this group of guys, man. They care about themselves and their teammates. They care about representing the state of Tennessee the right way.
Austin and David.
Rob asked the question about the quarterbacks. I'll ask the question about vaccinations. Percentage-wise, can you give that at this point? And then everybody wants to talk offense and defense, but how do you feel about your special teams units and your return and all that stuff?
Yeah. Vaccinations don't have a percentage for you guys. We've continued to move the needle the right direction here as we've gotten through training camp. Guys have continued to do that mostly on their off days, but we're progressing, and we'll continue to progress here as we get close to kickoff. Special teams, I think you got some real experience with Paxton, right? And his consistency as a kickoff guy, as a punter, is important to our program, right? And a guy that, in some respects, I think it's easy for fans or for staff to take for granted in some ways. The snappers have been really competitive throughout training camp. They're going to continue to compete this week before we decide who's going to be the first guy out there on game day. Field goal battle has really been the same way. Those guys are competing in a really good way. We've put them in a lot of competitive situations, ending practices that way, Mayday field goal situations, trying to put them in a real live situation. We finished every scrimmage with those guys having to drain one at the end. like what they've done. Special teams wise, returners, some experience there with Valus. A guy that's done it at a really high level. Still have a competition at the punt returner spot, so we'll see how those things unfold this week. Our guys as a whole, though, collectively, Coach Eck does a great job of leading them every single day. Great energy, great effort, playing with really good technique. We're going to continue to grow that way as we go through the season, but I like the importance and attitude that our players have about how special teams affects the game.
Josh, how do you guys splitting up reps at quarterback right now, and how has Joe handled not having a spring?
Well, him not having spring is just what it is. So for him, yeah, he's got less time on task in what we're doing offensively. He spent a ton of time in May learning what we were doing before everybody was back in June. The quarterback group as a collective group has spent a ton of time and energy, really becoming refined in what we're doing. I thought, we're the guys that were here in spring ball, how they showed up in training camp, fundamentally, technique, completely different. Joe's really progressed, during the course of our training camp. You look at the first half and then the second half, much more comfortable in what we're asking him to do, and has great ownership.
Adam and Jimmy.
Adam Sparks, Knox News, another follow-up on quarterbacks. You said no decisions have been made. Do the players know who the starter is, and how is?
They don't.
Is there a value to them knowing at a certain date, and their teammates knowing so many days out?
I said in the beginning, once we've had a guy that has earned it and proven it in some respects, not just to the staff but to the teammates, then you're able to announce the guy. And I think our football team has great trust in all three of those guys, the way they've competed and continued to grow and gotten better. And when we're ready to name a guy, we will.
Josh, is there a particular area of your team, whether it's offensive line, defensive line section, or wherever, that you think's a lot better now than it was at the end of spring?
Yeah, first one would be our linebackers, just who we had, number of bodies, or lack of number of bodies at that position during the course of spring ball. Getting a couple guys back healthy off of injuries. They've come back and have competed at a really high level. The additions that we've brought into that room, the culture inside of that meeting room is completely different than it has. Coach BJ's done a fantastic job of leading those young men. They've had real buy-in. Competition has been a huge help in creating that type of culture as well.
West and Trey.
Josh, I know going into camp there was the concern about sort of the depth or the numbers available at the tight end position. As things have progressed, maybe looks like Bell's gotten out there a little bit to stretch at least. Have any guys gotten out there to do some things or showed you something to make you feel better about that?
Yeah, our two guys that have been here and played in Pope and geez, I'm blanking right now for whatever reason, have done a really good job. Hunter Salmon is a young guy that has continued to do a really good job. Miles Campbell has done a really good job as well. I think that's a position that we're going to have to continue to cultivate and grow as we go through the season. The depth part of it is something, obviously, that as we lost Austin, placed more of an emphasis on developing those young guys.
Josh, when you look at how you guys are trying to install the offense in the spring, and then you get here to fall camp, how do you think your players have adapted, playbook-wise, but also, maybe formation that you're running out there in practice, them getting that down? Do you think that they've been able to grasp what you've been putting out?
Yeah, offensively, our kids do grasp what we're doing. I think during training camp, because you're constantly installing, you get to game week, a week from now, and you put in your package. In some ways, it becomes easier for them, right? I think they have a good understanding of what we're doing. They've gotten on the same page with the quarterbacks. They're handling the tempo portion of it extremely well, handling, the whistle to the next snap in a much better way. I think, that's a position that we got to continue to develop guys at, though, as well as we go through the season. Javante, Milton, we were talking about earlier, that's a guy that's only got 14, 15 practices in what we're doing. So he's a guy that's really come on here the last 4 or 5 practices as far as comfort and understanding how we want to play and then being able to play the play.
Ben and Brent.
just with it being 10 days away from kickoff and it being kind of a Thursday night game and the quirkiness of that, are y'all still in fall camp mode, and what will preparation look like over the next 10
This
days?
week's really kind of a combination. We'll get some scout looks, practice squad looks that you're trying to anticipate what you might see from the other side on game night. At the same time, I think it's important that you continue to build your football team, so we'll do some good on good as well.
When Coach Ellerby was in here, he said he felt like he had 9 or 10 guys on the offensive line that he thought he could play. But where do you think the depth of that unit is now, and how comfortable are you with where that group has progressed?
As an entire roster, we're thinner there than you would want to be, just numbers. But I think the guys have grown, right? The guys that aren't in the starting 5 have really started to grow, and at that position, eventually you're going to get somebody nicked up, right? And the versatility of some of those guys will be important too, being able to move from left side to right side, or being able to play multiple spots inside too.
Eric and Austin.
Kind of the same question about the wide receivers. How do you like the depth of that position?
I think there is some depth there. We got some guys that are young in what we're doing. I mentioned Javante earlier. Jalen was out for a portion of spring ball. I think he's really started to grasp what we're doing inside, playing in the slot a majority of the time. I think we have the ability to play, 5, 6 guys there, and all of them compete and play at a really high level.
Coach, you talked about cultivating the tight end position. Julian Nixon, what did you guys think of him before he got here, and then now that he's kind of found a home there, it seems?
Yeah.
What do you think about him kind of through fall camp and how he's progressed?
I do think that it is a home for him. A guy that played out on the perimeter a lot, the stuff that you're doing inside the box, whether that's in line or off the ball, is relatively new for him. He's a smart kid that cares. He's learning how to compete on a consistent basis and really strain inside of the core in particular. Natural as a pass catcher. He's got a bright future.
Madison and Trey.
Hey Coach, Tim Banks has said in an ideal defense there's flexibility at every position, especially in the secondary. That's a unit that just had 5 interceptions last season. How would you assess where they are right now, 10 days out from game day? And secondly, what were your conversations like with Brian Maurer that maybe led to him transferring?
The defensive backfield, I think there is flexibility there. You have guys that have played multiple positions. We've stressed that since we got here. As you go back and look at spring ball, the summer, and this fall training camp, guys have been put in multiple positions. As somebody gets nicked up or matchups, or maybe you want to change up the matchups during the course of a game week, the flexibility of those guys to play multiple positions. At the end of the day, the more you know, the more comfort you have, the more ownership you have, and creates flexibility during the course of the season too. I like that group in this, that I think they have a clear understanding of what we're doing and are able to play once the ball is snapped as fast as they are. Just one of the things that when I first got here and having conversations with our players, that was something that they struggled with, and I think they like what we're doing on the defensive side of the ball, being multiple, but being able to line up and play football.
And on Maurer?
With Brian, I just had a conversation where we were at that point in training camp, and ultimately he decided that he wanted a different opportunity for his future, and we wish him nothing but the best.
Hey Josh, when you look at the running back room and those guys trying to get reps up there, how have you guys been able to kind of break that up, even in a scrimmage or at practice? It seems like you've got a pretty deep room when it comes to talent. Can you talk about the guys maybe that aren't Jabari Small, Talon Evans, and how you're going to use them?
Yeah, I think we still have a competition at that spot as we go through this week before we get into game prep. That's a room that you're going to ultimately end up playing 5 guys, maybe 6 during the course of the season. So even if you're not the 1 or the 2 that's running out there the first week of the season, continuing to grow and mature, and everything's been earned inside of this program from the moment that we got here. They've competed in a good way. Some of them got to continue to grow, but we're going to continue to cultivate that.
Last question in the back.
Should I just go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey Coach, I'm sure you've been asked this in the past, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. You developed a lot of great quarterbacks in your time coaching. What are the traits that the starting quarterback of your team will have?
Physically, there's a lot of different traits. Some are big, some are small, some are freaky fast, some have a freaky strong arm, some are great anticipation throwers. At the end of the day, I think competitive spirit's the number one thing that they got to have. They got to be wired in a way that they're going to compete in the building with their teammates and when they're by themselves every single day. And I think that leads to a leadership trait too, that you get 10 other guys, but ultimately 120 other guys on the football team to really buy into you, and that comes starting by your work habits. The guys that are competing for the job here have all done that in a really positive way. There's some similar traits between all of them, but there's some differences too, and at the end of the day, as a head coach and as a staff, you got to trust that guy with the ball, and he's going to be your lead decision maker, and he's got to be sound in what he does.
All right, thank y'all. We will be sending